It is day 143. I know it feels like 4,043, but no, 143 of the second Trump administration. And right now, there is a curfew in effect for a second night in the city of Los Angeles. This is the sixth day of protests sparked by the Trump administration's immigration raids in the nation's second largest city. Tonight, we have seen more demonstrations both in Los Angeles and across the country, with local officials warning ICE raids are spreading fear throughout their communities. I want to bring in NBC's Morgan Chesky. He is live in downtown L.A. for us. Morgan, exactly 24 hours ago, as last night's curfew was in place, you talked to us. What's different tonight?
Steph, about everything that could be different is different at this point in time. That curfew just going into effect for the second night in a row. We're not too far from where we spoke to you last night outside of that federal building. And here we are. This is the remnants. Well, there's no one left, Steph. Within the last 60 seconds or so, they've cleared out. This, believe it or not, Steph, was a crowd that at one point several hours ago numbered about 1,000 strong that marched from a park in downtown L.A. to City Hall. And there they stood for about an hour, and our crew was there across the street, Steph. And what was so interesting is we watched one crowd face off against officers on the steps of City Hall. There did appear to be another contingent of the crowd take on another group of officers. We know that things were thrown at officers, flashbangs were deployed, and at that point, very quickly, officers corralled the crowd and started moving them away from City Hall, which, as it stands right now, is several blocks from us at this point in time. We did have mounted officers kind of moving through the crowd, pushing people back. In fact, our own producer was hit in his back by a rubber bullet. He's doing just fine, but those were some of the tools used to disperse the crowd that you can see right now is very effective. Now, we've talked about this curfew a little bit, Steph. We do know that of everyone arrested within the last 48 hours or so, the majority of those have been for failing to disperse. Only a handful have been violations of the curfew. And in anticipation of another day of protests today, walking through downtown L.A., you'd be hard-pressed to find a glass window. Business owners, store owners have blocked everything off with plywood, trying to protect their property as much as possible because no one really knows how much longer these demonstrations are going to go. When we were with that group of about 1,000 strong, I talked to multiple people in the crowd. Some of them, it was their first day protesting. Some of them, it was their third or fourth day. But multiple people use the same word, that they persist to make sure their message is heard. They were concerned, of course, that the violent acts that happened over the weekend would overshadow that. But they say we're going to continue to rally and peacefully protest to let the Trump administration know that's what's taking place is not okay. Of course, one arrest, Steph, that took place that was very high profile in L.A. happened in the neighborhood of Boyle Heights. That is where federal ICE agents essentially pinned a car. It was initially reported as an accident. It turns out that officials say that the gentleman inside that car had thrown rocks at federal officers. He is now in ICE custody. But meanwhile, as Jacob Soboroff reported earlier today, raids continue to happen up in Northern California in the farming area where day laborers were taken into custody as well. As it stands tonight, Steph, I just won't speak for a second. That silence at this point in time in downtown L.A. is something we have not heard for several days.
But what I'm looking at behind you, that police presence, is that local law enforcement? Because L.A. Mayor Karen Bass has said over and over, yes, there's conflict, but we've got it under control. My men and women are handling it. And the White House is making the argument it's lawless and out of control, and Karen Bass isn't stopping anything. So who are those men and women behind you? Who do they report to?
Steph, to my understanding that these are members of LAPD, and our photographer Gil can give us a closer look here as we push in. We are keeping our distance, as you'll understand, because multiple officers in this lineup are holding that device that can fire those rubber bullets and fire the tear gas. We have not seen tear gas deployed tonight, important to note. The only time I've seen the National Guard, Steph, was today outside of the federal detention center, which is part of that federal complex near where we are. They were essentially guarding the area, protecting the property. That is the capacity with which we've seen the National Guard deployed. As far as moving crowds, dispersing crowds, it has appeared to be L.A. police, albeit police officers dressed in riot gear that have been the ones responsible for that. Steph?
Morgan, thank you so much. And we're also starting to get a clearer picture of what could come next. Two sources are telling NBC News that ICE is preparing to send special tactical teams to 5 cities run by Democratic leaders, including New York and Chicago. These units use long guns and tactical vests for operations that are considered high risk. Meanwhile, the Trump administration formally responded to California's legal bid to block the military from getting involved in immigration enforcement. The DOJ says California's suit is a crass political stunt that puts American lives in danger. Well, the judge is set to hear arguments from both sides tomorrow. But I just want to level set with you for just a moment. President Trump made his stance on immigration and his plans for mass deportation the centerpiece of his presidential campaign. But I want to look at the actual numbers. For Trump's first couple of months, he deported fewer people than Joe Biden did. He finally surpassed his predecessor's number in April with 17,000 deportations. But at this pace, that is less than half of what it would take to match the record annual total. And that record happened under President Barack Obama in 2013, not Trump. Where does Donald Trump excel? As a showman and a salesman. He beats Democrats at marketing and branding. He'd probably like to be known as the deporter-in-chief, but Obama already got tagged with that nickname, and there is no evidence that Trump's immigration policies are protecting American jobs or lives. But he is producing television right now that he wants you to see. He is trying to grab your attention. At the same time, he is spending $134 million of your money, taxpayer money, to send troops to the streets of L.A. He's also spending $45 million of your dollars for a military parade that falls on his birthday. And he is pushing through a giant budget bill that has big cuts to Medicaid, food programs, and other benefits to the American people while expanding his tax cuts. Donald Trump is very good at commanding our attention, no question. But let us not just focus on where he's directing our eyes. We need to stay informed and engaged on every move coming out of this White House. So let's do it with our nightcap. They are here. John Allen, senior national politics reporter for NBC News. Dan Nathan, CNBC contributor and co-host of the Risk Reversal podcast. And Democratic strategist Basil Smikle will be joining us soon in true New York City and live TV style. He's stuck in traffic. All right, John, The Atlantic is reporting that the White House is delighted with this situation, with one senior aide saying, and I want to make sure I have this right, we couldn't have scripted this better. Scripted this better. Talk to us about the political risks here.
Well, I mean, on a political risk level, of course, there's a huge risk of overreach. Donald Trump talked about immigration, talked about deporting people during his campaign, often talked about deporting the worst and deporting criminals. I think there are a lot of Americans who
deporting the worst criminals, and they're deporting farm workers in Northern California.
This is what I'm getting to. I think that there is a huge risk for them in overreach. The fact that somebody in the administration would say they couldn't have scripted it better at least makes people wonder whether, in fact, it is scripted. That in fact, the idea here is to provoke violence. We see already, as you just said, there's going to be expansion of this program into several other cities, and we've got a reconciliation bill in Congress, the one that Trump calls the Big Beautiful Bill, which will increase ICE agents by about 10,000 over the course of the next 5 years, include incredible bonus incentives for retention and recruitment, and give Trump the money to do this all over the country if he wants.
Last night, the curfew was implemented. It seemed to work. Tonight, we just saw it, that the curfew seems to be working again. If it does, is that a sign that the situation was never as bad as the White House proposed it to be.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what we've been hearing on the ground, right? So Gavin Newsom, he's got in front of this, and, he was basically saying that we are prepared for this sort of stuff. If you think about, this is a state that has actually had to deal with a whole heck of a lot. It was one of the hardest hit states during COVID, right? And we know what just happened with the fires earlier this year. It's also obviously a state that has a lot of history with this sort of protest and rioting in a way. And so, I guess when you see these pictures on air and you think about this whole idea that they've been kind of stewing for a fight, definitely with the blue state and with somebody like, Gavin Newsom, who was bringing it, right, if you think about it, to the president throughout the campaign, it makes some sense politically from their standpoint. From a policy standpoint, it obviously sets a really bad precedent, especially if you see these things sort of die out. My view, and I know that things got really heated late last year when you think about, on the campuses, right? And that was something that a lot of us really wish did not go that way, but it didn't get violent. And I think that, words can be violent, and I think that's really what kind of was taken away from that. But we didn't see it at the DNC. We didn't really see it come back in the fall. And this is likely to be ephemeral, a lot like those other things. And I think when you think about the Marines going there, it kind of sets the stage for something that is just totally overblown, right? And especially if they're just able to contain this in a way through the curfews and some of the other stuff.
And what we've seen is over the course of one full Trump presidency and now half a year of a Trump presidency, you've seen chaos in the streets repeatedly under his presidency, right? You've seen Charlottesville back in 2017. You saw the George Floyd protests and the response to that. You saw in Washington, D.C., him clearing Lafayette Square with federal agents. And now you see what's going on in Los Angeles. And this kind of chaos and this provocation and this tendency toward violence and the use of federal authority, whether you're talking about calling up the National Guard here or sending in the Marines, is something that is part and parcel of Trump presidency so far. Now, that doesn't mean that all of that is because of Donald Trump, but it is all happening on his watch.